Once we've found the various different types of support that we are going to use, we have to figure out how we're going to use it and how we're going to create the arguments that we need to create in our speeches. So first and foremost, we have to understand what an argument is. An argument is a set of logical premises that lead to a clear conclusion. So if you are making arguments, you have evidence that gets you from point A, your premise, to point B, your conclusion. If you don't have the evidence that connects you from A to B, you're simply just making assertions. You aren't really making arguments. So we need the support that we've gathered in order to make logical arguments. Once you have all of this support, all these various different types of support, you have to learn how to sift through that support and make some decisions as to which pieces of support you're going to use and which ones you aren't. Because I can guarantee you that you are going to find pieces of support that work better than others. And sometimes you'll find one piece of support that works for your speech as it is in that moment. And then as you develop the speech, you realize that that's not quite where you want it to go. And so sometimes you just have to drop that piece of support if it no longer works for your speech. As I said earlier, you want to make sure that you use a variety of different types of speeches. A speech gets boring if we rely on just straight definitions and facts and statistics. We need other things in there. We need a story followed by a statistic, followed by a fact, followed by a definition, followed by an example, right? We want a lot of different types of support in order to keep things interesting for our audience. In addition to all of this, you want to make sure that you are choosing the appropriate forms of support, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. But these forms of support are going to depend on the type of speech that you're giving. It's going to depend on the context of that speech. It's going to depend on the audience and what they want to hear. And some evidence is going to be more appropriate than others. So we always have to make sure that we are using the correct forms of our support. We also want to make sure that we are always checking for the relevance of the support that we are finding. Checking for things like the authority of that source, the currency of that source, those sorts of things. And in addition, we want to make sure that the support that we have actually supports the key argument that we're making. If the support that you have gathered doesn't actually help you prove your thesis statement, or it doesn't actually help you to persuade or inform your audience, you want to make sure that that's the support that you want to use. And generally speaking, if your support is not doing those things, you might want to find other forms of support that are more relevant to your speech. You also want to make sure that you don't go overboard with your support. One of the most important things about public speaking is that you are using your own voice to get a message out there. And if you're using too much support, then we lose your voice because you're just using the voice of the definitions and of the facts and of the experts. And you want those voices in there, but you also don't want your voice to get lost in all of that noise. You also want to make sure that you are not manipulating your support. Oftentimes, it's tempting when we're doing research to find the support that directly connects to what we want to say and to ignore the evidence to the contrary. But if we are reading 10 articles and only one or two of them are saying the thing that we want to say, we might want to take another look at our thesis statement and make sure that we're making the argument that is supported by the research that we've been doing. You don't want to cherry pick just the information that fits your worldview, because that would be dishonest to the audience. That would be misleading the audience as well as misleading yourself. So you want to make sure that you are saying and that you are giving an argument to the audience that is fully supported by the experts and by the research that exists out there. You can't just take one sentence out of an article that agrees with you when the rest of the article disagrees with you. So you should never manipulate the support in your speech. Finally, you want to make sure that your support is adequate. I said before that you don't want to go overboard on support, but you also don't want to use too little support. We need to make sure that we have just enough, that kind of Goldilocks state of support, where we have not too much and not too little, but we have enough so that our audience is able to be persuaded or be informed by the logical arguments that we are making. We want to have just enough of other people's voices so that our own voices can be amplified with that support that we are using.